I've lined up every single commander in Wargroove 2 by their Tier 2 Groove charge speed, with the fastest commanders on top and the slowest commanders on the bottom. Poor Nuru. In this video, we're going to cover the on-release strength of each commander, starting with one of the fastest commanders, Emeric. Emeric's Tier 2 Groove is not a lot to talk about. He summons a great big crystal. It's very similar to Emeric in Wargroove 1. However, there are a couple things to keep in mind. Right now, Emeric is one of the fastest commanders in the game, which is definitely a big buff. On the other hand, mages are a lot worse. It seems like they don't one-shot pikes now, they don't get their crits as easily under the crystal. This is a big hit to Emeric's power. However, Emeric's Tier 2 Groove increases the range of trebuchets and ballistas and archers and warships and krakens by 2 on the turn that he summons it, which is insanely good, possibly game-winning. Because Emeric is so fast and you'll be putting crystals just about everywhere, in addition to the +2 range trebuchet thing, I'm going to put Emeric in A tier. And by A, I mean, I think that could be balanced, but we'll keep an eye on it. It sounds pretty strong. Alright, next up is Wulfar. Again, Tier 2 Groove at 175, Wulfar is an incredibly fast commander and one of the best attackers in the game. Wulfar has the same Tier 1 Groove that they did in the original Wargroove game, but their Tier 2 Groove is so cool, I just have to show it to you. Just gonna click a little bit. You not only gulp a unit out of the way, dealing damage to it, but it can bounce several times, dealing damage on every bounce. This makes Wulfar insanely good, as Wulfar can take down strongholds and commanders. Like most fast charge commanders, except for Emeric, who's actually good late game for some reason, Wulfar is actually good in the early game and falls off in the late game, which balances him a little bit. Still, due to all the cross-map lethals and crazy stuff Wulfar can do, plus the potential for early stronghold rushes, I've got to put Wulfar in the I think that's balanced, but we'll keep an eye on him tier. Next up is Yoda. Yoda is actually completely changed from Wargroove 1. Yoda's new Blade Dash Tier 2 Groove, and the Tier 1 works similar, you just get less range, allows Yoda to dash and change the direction of the dash in mid-air. You no longer have to set up weird checker pieces with your units, you can just do it. It's a little bit weak, but the repositioning is kinda good, and having a fast charge means Yoda can do it a lot. I definitely think that's balanced. I'm gonna put Yoda in the balanced tier. Alright, Valder. Oh, Valder. Valder is actually very strong right now, but not because of Valder's Tier 2 Groove. As powerful as Valder's Tier 2 Groove is, summoning 2 skeletons and making all soldiers deal double damage for a turn, realistically, you're going to be able to hit like 3 enemies with the Tier 2 Groove, and you trade swords down in the late game, so you won't have as many swords. Honestly, Valder's late game isn't as good as everyone thinks. Valder is still a hyper early game commander. You're mostly going to be using his Tier 1 Groove to get lots of early advantage, and that's okay. The Tier 2 Groove is just there to keep Valder relevant in the mid game if you don't use your Tier 1 Groove, or in the late game if for some reason you get stuck playing a late game with Valder. However, just because Valder's early game is so good, and Valder is next to broken on some of the quick play maps right now, that's not really a Valder problem, that's a problem with the maps, but I'm gonna put Valder in the I think that's balanced, but you might be a little broken there, buddy category. Valder's pushing it. Valder's pushing this category a little bit. However, on real maps, not quick play maps, Valder does seem pretty balanced, and so I think I'm gonna keep them in the A tier for now. Sigrid. Ah, poor Sigrid. Sigrid finally got the buffs she deserved back in Wargroove 1, but it's not good enough for Wargroove 2. Her Tier 2 Groove is her Tier 1 Groove. She gets to eat a unit and recover health. And you know, that's really good in Wargroove 2. Healing is even better in Wargroove 2 when your army can charge a groove for you. But her Tier 2 just makes her invincible. Except she's not invincible. Witch Hexes still hit her, Grooves still hit her, Frog Pulls still can damage her. She's just not really invincible. She just can't be attacked in this mode. So ultimately, I think she's still a little bit weak. It's still cool that she can do this, and it's cool she can do this stuff at 225 Groove. And her Tier 1 being able to kill a unit at 175 is nice, but Wulfar can gulf a unit way sooner than that. At like, what, 100? So, I'm sorry, but Sigrid just kind of falls off compared to other commanders in Wargroove too. I'm gonna put her in the weaker category of balanced. I'm gonna put her in like the bottom of balanced. She's balanced, but she's a little weak. Personally, I think her tier 1 groove needs to activate sooner. Her tier 2 groove can be 225, that's fine, but her tier 1 groove should activate a little bit sooner. Otherwise, it seems like, I don't know, she's just a little bit weak. Pistol. Oh, Pistol. I have to show you Pistol. Pistol is not only one of the faster chargers in the game, getting tier 2 groove at 225, but her groove does this. Just look at it. Just look at it. Should this be one of the faster tier 2 groove charges in the game? I do not think so. Pistol is broken. There is nothing you can do to stop that. Even if you put holes in your army to try to stop the chain lightning, she can just fill the holes with her own army. Pistol should not have this faster groove charge. Just way too strong. S tier, busted, end of story. Alright, the twins. I really like the twins rework in this game. They changed the twins from a gimmick commander to commanders that can do really cool things. For example, the twins tier 2 groove will use both their grooves at the same time. But what I want to talk about is their tier 1 grooves. When they use their tier 1 Scorching Fire, it now puts a totem onto the field that summons the fire around it, dealing 2 damage to allies and enemies alike, but not buildings. Be careful, you could literally kill your commander with your own groove. Meanwhile, the other option you have for tier 1 groove, you can do one or the other, is Cooling Water. Also summons a totem, but this one heals immediately. Now the totems stay on the field and keep doing this at the beginning of the twins' turn. The problem is, these things are as fragile as glass. The enemies can easily destroy them, and they lose a third of their health every turn. Since the twins actually have to spend most of their 225 on their tier 1 groove, you'll usually just be forced to wait for tier 2, which makes them a lot less flexible. I personally think, like Sigrid, they should have the groove bar kind of move down to the middle. So they should get their tier 1 faster, but their tier 2 at the same time. That would make them more flexible and more balanced. I'm gonna put them at the bottom of balanced tier. There's definitely a lot of fun things you can do with them, but they're a little bit weak because of that. And they might just be a little weak in general. Honestly, I'm almost tempted to drop them into flex tier, but we'll keep them in balanced for now. Lytra is actually incredibly well balanced. She gets her tier 2 at 250 groove charge, and it's pretty cool. Her tier 1 though, which I also want to talk about, is also really cool. What she can do is she can spin enemies around in a circle, and actually choose how they spin. She can use this to dump enemies into buildings, destroying them, or dump like land units into the sea. She can reposition her own units to attack, or reposition enemies to be attacked. This is such a cool and versatile groove at tier 1, and tier 2 is just kind of a better version of it that stops enemies that get spun around from attacking, and does a little bit more damage. Overall, because Lytra's range on her groove is so small, and you could easily destroy yourself by using her groove, I'm gonna put her in the very middle chair here. Lytra is, I think, perfectly balanced. She's incredibly fun, incredibly powerful, incredibly hard to use, and incredibly rewarding if you do it right. She also gets her tier 2 groove at 100 groove charge, meaning she can actually compete with some of the more powerful fast charge groovers. I really think she's one of the best balanced commanders. In fact, Yoda, you're gonna come down here a little bit. You're not as good as Lytra. Alright, next we need to talk about Rhomb. Poor Rhomb. Rhomb needs 250 charge to use their groove, and it might just be a little bit too much. The thing is, you normally don't get Rhomb's tier 1 groove until the fast chargers already have their tier 2, and Rhomb's tier 1 groove isn't really that good. He gets an extra movement. I'll show you the tier 1. I'll show you the tier 1, and the tier 2 is pretty much the same thing. Rhomb moves a little bit, uses their groove, they get the ability to move again, and now they get, like, you know, a little bit more movement, and they can do some damage. Okay, great. The problem is, though, and Rhomb also gets tankier after they do this. The problem is that's not much. You're smacking a unit with your commander instead of smacking a unit with your commander. You can still kill Rhomb when they're like this, just by dealing damage. I mean, they get more defense, but they're not indestructible. And unlike Sigrid, they can even be attacked. The real benefit of Rhomb is actually the Tier 2 groove. When you get Tier 2 groove and go into Tier 2 crystal mode, your Goober attack becomes ranged. Whoopsie, I did it again. Hold on. Sorry, just my map will let me groove repeatedly. You get a ranged attack that does tons of damage. Great, you know, fantastic. I like having a ranged attack that does ton of damage. But, first of all, why is this doing less than it did before? I have questions about that. Why is this doing less damage than it did before? Is Rhomb bugged? And second of all, for 250 groove charge, one ranged attack is nice. It could possibly lead to a lethal and win you the game. Maybe. But if it doesn't, you're just kind of derping around and you can't do much. Also, it takes them so long to get their Tier 1 groove. For this reason, you know, I can't seem to put Rhomb in a wagon when they're like this. Interestingly enough, so they can't go into a wagon when they're like this. So yeah, I'm gonna put Rhomb in the balanced tier, kind of towards the bottom. Because although Rhomb has super strong game-winning plays, they don't have a lot else going for them. And I think they're gonna be really hard to use compared to the fast chargers that get groove quickly, make plays quickly. I feel like you're just gonna be playing from behind as Rhomb. Mercia! We gotta talk about Mercia. Mercia's Tier 2 groove is not that great, but it doesn't matter. Her Tier 1 groove is amazing. Mercia's Tier 1 groove is, you're not going to believe this, okay? You're never going to believe this. Her Tier 1 groove is the exact same groove that was really, really weak in Wargroove 1. But in Wargroove 2, it's so good. In Wargroove 2, you will have more damaged units to heal, even in competitive PvP. Mercia can use her army to charge her groove, so she'll be healing more often. At 100 groove points? What is that, just 100 groove points? To get a 5 health heal on everybody, including your commander? Mercia is so good now. We're going to see tons of great Mercia plays. I'm going to put her in the balanced tier, in one of the chairs. Mercia deserves a chair, because they didn't even really need to do much to her. She's just good in Wargroove 2. I will say her Tier 2 groove feels a little bit underwhelming, but it is just more of the same. It could be really good. It could potentially counter pistol. So we'll give Mercia the balanced chair for right now. Alright, we're starting to get into some of the slower charger commanders, but we're still in the middle. Elody. Oh, Elody. Elody needs 250 charge for her Tier 2 groove. And that's fine. That's fine. Elody's Tier 2 groove lets you steal a unit. You know, that is worth 250 groove charge. No complaints there. The problem is Elody's Tier 1 groove is kind of useless. You steal a unit, and then your opponent gets it back on their turn. Why? What do I do with that? I feel like Elody really needs a groove rebalance in the sense that her Tier 1 groove needs to be faster, her Tier 2 groove needs to be the same. This is a common theme you're going to see. I think a lot of these commanders that have really, really weak Tier 1 grooves need to get them more quickly. I think this is something that's so true of Elody, I'm actually going to put her in F tier. F stands for flex. You'll only play this if you're flexing. Like, her Tier 2 groove is good, but you have to use her Tier 2 groove. You can't use her Tier 1 groove, and that makes her so much less flexible. Elody would be so much fun if we could just play with her Tier 1 groove, stealing units for a turn at a really low groove charge. That would be so much fun. That would be so creative and interesting. I really think they need to, like, keep her total groove charge at 250, but let her Tier 1 happen sooner. That would make her a little better. Ragna suffers from the same problem as Elody, except both of her grooves, Tier 1 and Tier 2, are a little bit weak. They have a lot of utility, but you can't really use them that often. I could show you her groove. She gets a jump at Tier 2 with lots of range, but her Tier 1 is a super short range jump. It comes with a push. It comes with a push, and pushes are good, though it doesn't push your allies, just it'll only push enemies. And you know, pushes are good. And it does damage, too. That's all good stuff. Don't get me wrong. This is good stuff. The problem is, she just gets tier 1 groove too slowly. And it's not really powerful enough or impactful enough to feel that scary. I could be wrong about Ragna. This is one of the tiers I'm saying that I could be wrong about. But I really think they need to make her tier 1 groove just a little bit faster, and then she'll be okay, because she'll have the flexibility to make up for her somewhat weaker groove. Greenfinger. Oh, Greenfinger. Greenfinger does take a little bit, 150 groove charge, to get their tier 1 groove. But their tier 1 groove is as good as these folks' tier 2 grooves. For the most part. Maybe not Emmerich. Definitely not Pistol. But for the most part, Greenfinger's tier 2 groove is tier 1 groove is amazing. Look at this. It's the same groove as it was in Wargroove 1, but it's so good in Wargroove 2. You've got these epic vines that'll protect your army when army is so valuable, and attacking with your army is so valuable, and position is so valuable. And these vines are just awesome, and they can move. Like, Greenfinger is just better. Greenfinger used to be good in Wargroove 1. They're better in Wargroove 2. And their tier 2 groove, vines that can damage you for 250, that's reasonable. That's amazing. I think Greenfinger is balanced. I'm going to put them in the chair that's a little bit too far forward and hides your commander, but just remember Greenfinger's there. Just kidding. I'll keep them here. Greenfinger's pretty balanced, I'd say. Alright. Merciful is a joke commander. There's not a lot to talk about here. We're just going to put them in the flex tier. You're only playing Merciful in PvP if you're flexing. Oh, Caesar. We got to talk about my good doggo here. Caesar's tier 1 groove is fairly balanced. It's very similar to a Caesar's groove in Wargroove 1. It lets units move again. But only soldiers now. Not really powerful units. That's fair. That's fine. The problem is, Caesar's tier 2 groove might be a little busted. Let me show you the range on this. This is the range on Caesar's tier 2 groove. You can make this many units. Do you know how many units this is? You can make 12 units move again. 12. You can make 12 pikes move again. You can make 12 archers move again. What is going on here? How is that balanced? Compare this to Valder, for example, who can summon 2 swords and make them do double damage. Well, I can give my swords 6 movement and make them attack twice. Now, of course, Caesar's tier 2 groove charge is a lot bigger than Valder's. But still, I've got to say that Caesar sounds insanely powerful when you give Caesar tons of pikes. Added to the fact that pikes and archers were both buffed in Wargroove 2, I'm still confused about that one. Why would you buff those 2 incredibly strong units? But they are. So I'm going to put Caesar in the, tier 1 seems balanced and tier 2 might be in line with Valder, but we're going to keep an eye on you because I think you might have too much power there, my good buddy boy there. Good boy, best pupper. Alright, Dark Mercia. Dark Mercia needs a lot to use her tier 2 groove. She needs an 150 groove charge just to use tier 1. But her tier 1 is as good as a fast charger tier 2. I'll tell you why. Dark Mercia. Alright, first of all, let me use her tier 2 just to show you why that's 350. Boom! Look at all the swords, okay? She attacks the whole map for 350 groove charge. That's fair. She does 10 damage to all enemies. Additionally, her tier 1 groove does 30 damage around her and heals her, so she's a healer at 150 groove charge that also does AoE damage, that ignores defense and can hit commanders? Her tier 1 is so good. Her tier 1 is so good, I was winning a game as Wulfar, someone I put in the questionable category, and my opponent used tier 1 Dark Mercia grooves to play even with me for a bunch of turns. That's how good Dark Mercia is at just tier 1. I think she's balanced, I think she's fun. I'm going to put her in the balanced category. Dark Mercia just works in Wargroove 2. Alright, Koji. Koji is another one of the slower charge commanders. It takes 200 groove charge just to get their tier 1, and their tier 2 is really just a more powerful version of their tier 1. Sparrow Bombs. However, there's a good reason for this. Tier 2 Sparrow Bombs are very tanky, they're hard to get rid of, and, you know, they're kind of in the air. This means Koji can use them to wall, to threaten commanders, and of course to threaten massive lethals. That's kind of worth 350. I don't think it would be fair for cheaper than that. It also turns Koji into one of the best commander killers in the game. I can't even show you how much damage these deal, but they deal like 60 plus damage to a commander. It's insane at tier 2. For this reason, Koji can just win you the game, but you have to get a lot of groove charge in order to do it. Also, Koji isn't that flexible. Their tier 1 can be destroyed pretty easily, and it doesn't do as much, and you're not really going to get tier 1 and tier 2, so you have to choose one or the other. I'm going to put Koji in the balanced category, actually, not the broken category. The reason is, although they have a game-winning tier 2 groove, they really have to save up for it, and so I feel like just their immense 350 groove charge makes it kind of fair. But on bigger maps, on big maps where you can get a lot of groove early, Koji could easily break the game, so I'll put them in the, let's keep an eye on you category. Let's keep an eye on you, A tier. Alright, Nadia. Nadia. This is a tier that I'd like to dub the unfortunate tier. Alright, everyone at 400 groove, except Sedge. Sedge is cool, we'll talk about Sedge first. Everyone else is kind of bad for reasons we're going to talk about. Alright, so Sedge, the first commander at 400 groove charge, slowest in the game, is actually a really good and well-balanced commander. Sedge needs 200 groove charge, an insane amount, to get their tier 1 groove. But their tier 1 groove is a weaker version of their Wargroove 1 groove, and their tier 2 is a more powerful version. At tier 2, Sedge has... You remember what Rhomb's tier 2 was, right? Sedge has that. Sedge has basically Rhomb's tier 2, but dealing true damage instead of commander damage, and resetting your movement on kills, also resetting your groove. That's insane. Sedge becomes a Rhomb, but with resets instead of defense, and dealing true damage. Now, of course, Sedge can't hit buildings because true damage doesn't hit buildings, but Sedge is just awesome. Sedge will eat your entire army. However, this is fair. This is perfectly balanced. In fact, Sedge is, well, certainly stronger than Rhomb. There's no question there, in case that wasn't obvious. But Sedge, I'm going to put Sedge in the balanced category. And the reason that I'm going to do this, the reason that I'm going to put Sedge in the balanced category, is because 400 groove is a lot. Your opponent could win the game before you even get tier 2 groove. And when you use tier 1 groove, it does not charge your tier 2 groove, meaning you're going to be even slower to get groove than anyone else in the game because of how your tier 1 works. So yeah, I think Sedge is fair. I think if you let Sedge get tier 2 groove and you haven't won the game yet, you deserve what's coming. Alright, Nadia. Oh, Nadia. I'm so sorry, Nadia. Nadia was like the character they were advertising, and she's really cool. I mean, look at what her groove can do, alright? Let me show you what her groove can do. What she can do is she can set a bunch of units on fire, dealing massive damage and immolating them. Even creating a DOT effect on them that you have to use other units to put out the fire. The problem is in the details. Let me show you what I mean, because it's a little bit tricky. So, Nadia's tier 1 groove can affect up to 3 enemies, and it deals a fair bit of groove damage. The problem is, at very slow, it takes 200 groove charge to get it. And it takes another 200, so 400 total groove charge, to get her tier 2 to affect 5 enemies, deal a bit more damage, and apply the burn, which can be easily removed by an enemy taking the douse action. Because you can't actually choose which enemies you target, this is a terrible groove. Ultimately, the enemies you hit could be completely random, meaning you could win or lose based on bad luck, which is something they had tried to remove from Wargroove 2. And also, her groove is so slow, and it's a little bit weaker than, for example, Caesar, Valder, Wulfar. Like, Koji, for example, can do more single-target damage. Dark Mercia, for example, can deal more AoE damage in a more controlled and reliable way and heal herself. Ultimately, Nadia just doesn't hold up to the other commanders. What they need to do is they need to let Nadia pick the targets of her groove. And even then, I don't know if it'll be enough to keep her fair and balanced. She might still be too weak. but definitely Nadia needs to be able to pick the targets of her groove. Alright, Tenry. Tenry has been nerfed in Wargroove 2. They've taken 1 off of her range, which it might sound like just 1, but it's actually 2 because she often flips a unit to the other side of her, so she effectively has 2 less groove range at tier 1, meaning her groove is her Wargroove 1 groove, but nerfed. Why? Now there is one special thing that makes it a little better, and that's that it can move trebuchets now. However, there's been talk that the developers might take that out of the game. Let me show you why moving trebuchets is a big deal. Whoops. And also this subtle thing where she is a little bit tricky to get her into wagons, but you can still do it. You just have to click a little bit more. I'm going to change her to tier 1 groove, and I'll show you. Using her tier 1 groove, Tenry can move a trebuchet into crit range of your HQ, and this is the only reason that I'm not putting her in F tier, because that deals a ton of damage. As you can see, 71 damage to a stronghold, and that can win you the game. That alone makes her worth playing, but if that ever gets removed, her nerfed groove, and the fact that her tier 2 groove is basically nothing, this is her tier 2 groove. You might notice it's the same as her tier 1 groove, but with more range. And it has some push. Great. But that is not good enough to be worth me not using my tier 1 groove twice. I would rather use my tier 1 groove twice than my tier 2 groove once, and those things cost the same. It's ridiculous. So Tenry effectively doesn't have a tier 2 groove. Like, you're almost never going to use tier 2 groove on Tenry. For this reason, she is only in the balanced tier because to make up for all her weaknesses, she has a broken trick that she can move trebuchets. That's it. That balances Tenry. If they get rid of that, she might be in flex tier because she effectively doesn't have a tier 2 groove. There's gonna be some people who use it in cool ways, but I think just using tier 1 twice is just better, and they nerfed it, so yeah, Tenry is balanced because of trebs, weirdly enough. Vesper, Vesper can, Vesper, I don't know what Vesper does. She's so bugged right now, nobody knows what Vesper does. As you can see, I used Groove over here, but spawned 2 Shadow Sisters behind me. I don't know why. Sometimes they don't even show up. The game won't let me control where they appear, so it's completely random, which is silly. And the Smoke Shroud doesn't work. It defends your enemies instead of you, sometimes. And it doesn't disappear, sometimes. Vesper's just bugged. Vesper's super bugged. I'm gonna put Vesper in flex tier because if you want to play a commander that bugged, you've got to be flexing. Hopefully they patch her soon. I know the devs are working on it. The game was just released. But yeah, Vesper is bugged. When they fix Vesper, and if they let you actually pick where the Shadow Sisters go, she's gonna be, and we need to keep an eye on her tier, because that's pretty dang strong. Alright, Nuru. Nuru is the saddest placement of this tier list. I need to explain Nuru to you. Nuru's entire gimmick, her whole thing in Wargroove 1, was that she could summon any unit, and you didn't know what she could summon. You didn't know what your opponent was going to do. It could be a knight, it could be a dragon, it could be a sword, it could be a pike. And the fact that she could summon anything meant you had to defend against all of it, and that gave her insane pressure. But now, Nuru can only summon, let me show you her tier 1 groove here, weak units. You can get a little more variety with barracks, like you could get a mage on here, but it's not that great. I can pay 150 gold for this 150 gold dog. Now don't get me wrong, summoning a unit on the front lines is great. It can give you unit count, it can kill a unit and give you an advantage from that. But it's not worth the 200 groove charge you need to do it. For 200 groove, Valder's about ready to summon 2 swords and make all swords deal double damage. Wulfar has already gulfed a unit and damaged all of your stuff. Emer's planted a few crystals already. Dark Mercia has already healed herself and damaged your army. It's just not worth 200 groove. I don't know how this was balanced. To make matters worse, her tier 2 groove, which also costs an additional 200 groove, making her in the super slow tier of 400 groove total, is the same thing. She summons a unit and she just doesn't have to pay for it. Okay, great, I summon a pike for free. That saves me, what, 250 gold? It's late game by this point. Who cares? I have 400 groove charge. The game's about to end. This pike that I got for free, for not using tier 1 groove ever, by the way, is not going to make a heck of a difference. And additionally, oh, I get a discount on pikes from now to the end of the game. So what, I save 75 gold? Twice? Before the game ends? That's 150 gold? She's just so bad right now. All they need to do to balance Nuru is make her faster. All of her grooves, tier 1 and tier 2, only make sense if she's at a faster charge speed. She makes absolutely no sense at these speeds. I've got to put her in flex tier. I'm putting her in the bottom of flex tier, below Merciful, because she's so slow, it's just painful. I feel so bad for Nuru. Alright, so we're done with our tier list, and let me just do a quick recap and remind you of the most important points, as well as what I think are going to be the buffs and nerfs we might see in a future balance patch. Pistol is way too fast for their incredible unstoppable groove. We'll probably see their tier 2 groove get slower, maybe their tier 1 groove get slower as well. Emer, Wulfar, Valder, Doggo, and Koji all have amazing grooves that could possibly break the game under some circumstances. Koji has insane commander kill, Caesar has insane army, Valder has insane early game, Wulfar has insane early game against your stronghold, and Emer, weirdly enough for being a fast charge commander, has a sort of weak early game, but an insane late game with trebuchets, ballistas, and krakens and stuff. These commanders could be broken, but they could also be balanced as we find ways to counter them. For this reason, we'll keep an eye on them, but they're pretty good for right now. All of these commanders are pretty well balanced, with the ones at the bottom maybe needing a slight buff, but we'll see. I'm not going to talk a lot about them, because I already did. These, though, the flex tier. Elody needs their tier 1 to be faster, but their tier 2 at 250 is fine. Ragna needs their tier 1 to be faster, but their tier 2 at 250 is fine. Vesper needs to not bug the game out, and then she'll be insanely strong. Nadia needs to be able to pick who she targets with her groove. She's way too slow to have it be random. Merciful is a joke, and that is awesome, never change Merciful. And Nuru needs faster everything. She needs faster everything, please. Nuru needs faster. Alright, that's pretty much it for this tier list. If you're playing a lot of quick play, Valder is just the best quick play commander right now, just because how some of the maps work. But if you want to beat Valder without playing Valder, pick a commander in A or B tier, and you should be able to put up a good fight against Valder. That's it for now. I hope you enjoyed this release tier list, and keep in mind, the second they balance stuff, everything could change. That's all for now, and welcome to Wargroove 2. And if you disagree with everything I've said, please let me know in the comments. Tell me everything you disagree with in the comments. I will be happy to read it.